Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 3 with on the Arena ladder. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 37-4 with this deck, so again, I've been grinding an absolute ton to try and hit rank 1. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get there because I think the top two are just way too far out ahead at the moment. I think from what I've heard, they're both grinding the Alchemy ladder, which is really hard to compete with when you're playing other formats. But as you can see, the deck's been performing incredibly well for me. And now before I get into it, there's going to be an MTG zone link down in the description. If you click on that, I'll have the full deck list there that you can import into Arena if you want to try the deck out for yourself. And I'm also in the process of writing a full text article about this deck for MTG Zone Premium that will have more details, a full sideboard guide, how to change the deck for best of one, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So as soon as that's finished and up, I'll link that down in the description as well. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Mardu Giver of Runes Winota deck in Historic. And as the name suggests, this is a deck where the main engine card is definitely Winota, but at its heart, this is actually a Will pack-bound duelist deck. This is definitely the most powerful card in the deck, and I think this card is so well positioned right now. You know, this is the card that made me want to revisit the archetype, because Will being able to come down and steal an opposing One Ring or Shieldred is such a big tempo swing when those cards are everywhere right now. And, you know, all the decks that aren't running One Ring are very creature-based. All the combo decks are full of creatures. All the decks that aren't running One Ring are full of creatures as well. So this is going to have an impact in every game, in every matchup. And even the control decks, which are typically quite creature-light, most control decks right now are running One Ring or, you know, running creatures like Orcish Bowmasters as well. So this really does have a big impact in every single matchup. And we have a ton of ways that we can get this out fairly early as well. We can very consistently get this off on turn 4, either off the treasure tokens off Fable of the Mirror Breaker or Crucius, or off Winota as well. So we have a ton of ways to find this consistently. And like I said, it has such a big impact the turn it comes down. Then the specializations, the 3 that we have access to, are also really good. So, you know, even if the Will dies, we still get to keep the card we steal into the end of the next turn, but Will is actually pretty difficult to kill. You know, it's 5 mana, so it dodges Fatal Push, so the opponent needs to have kind of unconditional removal to be able to kill this, and not many decks outside of Rakdos are running that, and even then, they typically only run like 4 Heartless Act or 4 Go for the Throat, so most of the time, we can get the Specialize off, and then we can use the Specialize to sacrifice whatever we steal so the opponent doesn't get it back. And the red and the white specializations on this are really good. So the red one is really nice because it potentially enables us to just force through extra damage, right? We can attack, specialize the red one, get an extra combat step and attack. Very nice in combination with Juggernaut Peddler because it has vigilance, so we can attack with it twice off this. But the main reason that the red specialization is really nice, specifically with Winota, is because we can use it to get 2 Winota triggers. So if you have 2 non-humans out and you have this and you're going to specialize into red, your first combat step, you can just attack with one of the non-humans to get a Winota trigger, get another human in play, and then main phase 2, you specialize the red one, get another combat step, and then just attack with the other non-human to get a second Winota trigger, which is really powerful. Then the white specialization, the ability to reanimate anything, is really nice. Obviously, if you look at the deck, we have a ton of really high impact creatures, and the fact the creature you reanimate gets haste is really nice, specifically with Winota, because if we don't have a non-human in play, and we're reanimating a non-human from our graveyard, the fact that we give it haste means that we can then attack with it to get a Winota trigger, and if we have a non-human that we can attack with, we can potentially reanimate Winota as well. Now, we do have to sacrifice it at the beginning of the end step, but getting a hasty Winota and the Winota trigger is really strong as well. And then the black specialization, not as powerful because it does give the opponent a choice, but still generically powerful. If you only have a black card in your hand, it's still decent in a lot of spots. And if the opponent is low on life total, getting to draw 3 off this is obviously incredibly powerful as well. So Will, such a well-positioned card right now, and this deck is very consistently able to find it, which is really strong. Then, as I said, you know, Winota is kind of the engine card of the deck, and we are playing with the nerfed Winota, so we only get 1 trigger per combat, which is obviously a lot weaker than the unnerfed Winota, but it's still incredibly strong, and that does actually produce some deck building benefits as well. You know, in unnerfed Winota, you kind of wanted to run a very high density of cheap non-humans so that you can attack with multiple creatures and get multiple triggers. Since we only get one trigger with this, that means that we only really need 1 non-human in play to attack with, which means we don't have to run a very high density of non-humans at the bottom end of our curve, which is pretty nice in terms of the deck building requirements. In terms of enablers and payoffs for Winota, the non-humans that we have to enable it are Giver of Runes, Orcish Bowmasters, and the token it creates, which is really nice. The token from Fable of the Mirror Breaker, the spirit tokens from Seasoned Pyromancer, and the tokens off Sork and Zan as well. So we have a decent number of non-humans, but like I said, we don't need to run a ton because we only really need 1 in play to be able to maximize the Winota. And then the humans that we can hit off this are Juggernaut Peddler, Seasoned Pyromancer, Crucius, and very importantly Will. And you can obviously hit Winota itself as well. So if you play the Winota and hit another Winota, you can potentially just get that one in play, get through for an extra 4 points of damage. But Winota just so good at swinging the tempo in your favour, getting a bunch of humans in the battlefield, and specifically, if we can go Winota on turn 4, find a will, steal the opponent's One Ring or Shield Red, that's such a big tempo swing in basically every single matchup. So this combination is just so good, and I'm a really big fan of Winota right now. So we'll start off looking at the rest of the cards now, starting off with the non-humans, and the biggest addition that we get from the anthologies is Giver of Runes, and this is the perfect card for this deck. So previously, I was running Blazing Rootwaller in this slot because we run a lot of discard effects, we can get it into play for free, but obviously it's a 1 toughness creature in a Bowmaster's meta, and Giver of Runes is literally the perfect card for this deck because, first of all, it has 2 toughness, so it doesn't die to Bowmasters, which is really huge, but we have a lot of creatures in this deck that really want to have protection, namely Crucius, Winota, and Will. And being able to protect Crucius enables us to play. I'll get onto this in a minute. I don't think Crucius is playable in many decks now since the nerf, but I definitely think this is one of them, in part because Giver can protect it. But being able to protect the Winota, the turn it comes down is really huge. Being able to protect the Will so the opponent doesn't kill it before you can specialize is really huge. And it also makes combat really difficult for the opponent as well, because we can fairly easily just freely block bigger creatures and then give it protection as well. So Giver of Runes not only great at protecting our high impact creatures, but is also a non-human as well that we can attack with to trigger Winota as well. So really, really great addition to the deck. And this is kind of the perfect card that I've been waiting for this sort of archetype. Then we've got Orcish Bowmasters as well, which is one of the best cards in the format right now. And it's really nice in this deck as well, right? Obviously being able to ping opponents' 1 toughness creatures is great. Being able to ambush bigger creatures in combat, being a good hate piece against the ring is really good as well. But in this specific deck, as I mentioned, both the Orcish Bowmasters and the token it creates are non-humans for Winota, so we can flash this in, attack with the Orc token, so even if the opponent has a bigger creature to block it in combat, we then still have the Bowmasters to attack with the following turn to get another trigger. So Bowmasters, obviously one of the most generically powerful cards in the format, but also works really well with Winota in this deck as well. Then we got Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which is another really important card. So the 2/2 it creates is a non-human that we can trigger Winota with. The treasure it creates is really huge because it enables us to cast Will on turn 4, which is a really important carve out to have. It also enables you to potentially do stuff where we go, Fable of the Mirror Breaker into Winota, attack with the 2/2 to get a treasure token, which then triggers Revolt for Fatal Push, so we can attack, see what we hit off the Winota, and if we don't hit a high impact card like Will, we can then just Fatal Push whatever blocker the opponent has to keep the 2/2 around. So the 2/2 producing a treasure and being a non-human is really huge. Then Chapter 2, the looting effect, really nice at helping smooth our draws out, really nice at helping us dig for Winota. Even if we don't have Winota, playing Fable on turn 3 is great because we can just loot 2 cards away to try and dig towards it for our turn 4 Winota, which is really nice. Now, obviously, in a Bowmasters meta, you can get punished if the opponent flashes in the Bowmasters, but they have to do it before the trigger resolves, so you'll know if you can discard or not, right? If the opponent flashes in a Bowmasters, you'll know whether you want to discard 2 or not. Normally, you don't. At most, you probably want to discard 1 if the opponent does have a Bowmasters in play, but it's not as punishing as something like a Seasoned Pyromancer because they have to do it preemptively, if that makes sense. And then Chapter 3, Reflection of Kiki-Jiki, obviously incredibly powerful if it ever gets to untap. Have a ton of really high impact cards to copy, like Juggernaut Peddler, Bowmasters, and Seasoned Pyromancer are all great to copy with Reflection. And Reflection is also a non-human that we can attack with to trigger Winota as well. So Fable, really, really great in this deck. Then Seasoned Pyromancer is another way that we can get non-humans. So Seasoned Pyromancer obviously became a lot worse with the addition of Bowmasters because the opponent flashing it in response is pretty punishing, but I still think Seasoned Pyromancer is really important in this deck because it's a human that produces non-humans that is also a good curve into Winota, right? We can play Seasoned Pyromancer on turn 3, and then if we discard at least 1 non-land, we get the Spirit token, which can then trigger Winota going into turn 4. So Pyromancer doubling up as a human that can create non-humans works so well with Winota, and if the opponent doesn't have a Bowmasters, it's still really good, right? It's the best top deck if you're completely empty-handed to allow you to refuel. Obviously pairs really nicely with Reflection of Kiki-Jiki as well, so even though Pyromancer did become worse because of Bowmasters, I think it's specifically very good in this shell. And then in terms of the humans in the deck, I'm going to start off by talking about Crucius because I definitely think that this card is unplayable in a lot of decks, right? If you can't consistently protect Crucius, I'm really not very high on running it right now. So in the Jund list that I recently posted, for example, I don't think you can afford to run Crucius in that deck anymore, just because it can die to Bowmasters before it does anything, which is so bad for a 3-mana creature. But in this deck specifically, I think we can get away with running Crucius because we have multiple ways to protect it. As I mentioned, we have Giver of Runes that can protect it going into turn 3, which is really nice. We also have Juggernaut Peddler, which is really good at clearing the way for Crucius. We can play Peddler on turn 2, and then either force the opponent to flash in the Bowmasters preemptively, or get rid of it, or just get rid of any removal spell the opponent might have. to enable us to cast the Crucius, and we're also going to hit it off Winota a decent amount of the time, and when it's hit off Winota it has Indestructible, so we're basically guaranteed the first trigger there as well. So even though I think Crucius is kind of unplayable in decks that can't protect it, in this deck specifically, because we have so many ways to enable us for it to survive on turn 3, I definitely think it's worth running here. And additionally, I think it's really important in this deck because it's another way, in addition to Fable, that we can ramp into Will on turn 4. And additionally, it's a good way, we can shooter for it as well. So, some awkward curve outs in this deck where we don't have a non-human, or, say we have a Giver on turn 1 and it gets killed. If we have a Crucius on turn 3 and we have a Winota in hand, that's kind of awkward because we don't have any non-humans to trigger Winota. But with Crucius, we can just discard the Winota, name Ambitious to tutor Will, and then you have Will on turn 4. Assuming you have the 4th land, you can cast Will on turn 4, which is always going to have a big impact. So Crucius being able to tutor for Winota by discarding a 3-drop, or tutor for Will specifically and ramp into it, is really strong. And then, outside of that, we know how strong this card is if it gets to stick around. And as I mentioned, we have enough ways to protect it that I think the 1 toughness is, mitigated a lot by the ways we have of protecting it in the deck. And then, as I mentioned, we've obviously got Winota and Will at the top end of the deck. And then Juggernaut Peddler is another really impactful card as well. So first of all, we can hit it off Winota as a Thoughtseize effect, which is really powerful. In a lot of matchups, I've had situations where I've hit, had the option between a Will or a Crucius and gone for Juggernaut Peddler because hitting the opponent's hand is more impactful. So being able to hit a Thoughtseize off Winota is really sick. But just being able to play this on turn 2 is so good in a ton of matchups. Specifically against the mid-range decks, their most powerful proactive plays are all 3 mana. So getting this down on turn 2 to snipe a Fable of the Mirror Breaker or a Jostle is really impactful. But just in general, having a Thoughtseize effect on turn 2 is really good. We don't really care about the Juggernaut. And in fact, if we have Will in hand, the opponent playing a Juggernaut on turn 4 is actually beneficial for us because we can just use Will to steal it. And then we have a 5-3 that we can just attack the opponent with, apply a lot of pressure. So Juggernaut Peddler, so good in basically every matchup outside of aggro, and really nice to have a Thoughtseize effect that we can hit off Winota. And then the last non-land card in the deck is just Fatal Push, which I think is really important in a number of matchups. I think it's very important to have 1-mana interaction, specifically against decks like Devotion and Wizards that can be tricky matchups otherwise. And since we do still have Crucius in the deck, I think Fatal Push is kind of a must-have because, getting Crucius down, getting that treasure, and then holding open Revolt Fatal Push when Shieldred is everywhere right now is super important. So Fatal Push main deck has been really good. In terms of the mana base, we've got 25 lands, which has felt like a decent amount. We do have quite a high curve, but all of our 3-drops can help filter to find more lands. So 25 has felt really important because we really, really need to hit our 3rd land consistently. And if we do, we have good ways to dig for more lands off all of these cards as well, which is really nice. The other annoying thing about the mana base here is that we do have a lot of pressure on the mana base here, right? We need white and black on turn 1, we need white and black on turn 2 for Juggernaut Peddler, and we need double red on turn 3. So we're basically running all dual lands outside of the Sokenzan and Mountain to enable that. We've also got quite a painful mana base here, right? We've got the 12 Shocklands and a couple of Silent Clearing, which is a more recent addition, but we are, to all intents and purposes, an aggro deck, so the life loss hasn't really come up that often. In terms of the lands themselves, as I mentioned, we've got all of the shock lands. We've got 8 fast lands, which, ideally I would be running more. In previous versions of Winota, I was running 10 fast lands, but I found it was too much of an issue where we would have a tap land going into turn 4. As I mentioned, turn 4 Will, turn 4 Winota, so important. So I don't think you can really afford to be running more than 8 fast lands, or you're going to run into issues where you have a tap land going into turn 4, which is why I added Silent Clearing. So Silent Clearing, new addition from the Historic Anthology, is a Horizon land that can draw us a card, which is nice if the game goes long and we start running out of fuel a little bit. Also, another way for us to trigger the Revolt on Fatal Push, which is really nice. Now, the downside is we do take damage off it, but in most matchups, like I said, we are the aggro deck, so that's not really been too much of an issue. So overall, we really need to be running a lot of dual lands to enable white and black on turn 1 and 2, and that the double red on turn 3 for Seasoned Pyromancer. And then I've also got a couple of utility lands in Sokenzan, which I'm a big fan of in this deck because of Winota. So if we go Winota and the opponent kills our non-human, having Sokenzan as a way to channel in, to get more tokens that can immediately attack with haste and trigger Winota is really important as well. And then I do feel like a single basic is important as well because I have been running into Field of Ruin a fair amount. So having the single basic here just ensures that you don't get Stone Rain by the opponent's Field of Ruin and stuff like that. So that's the main deck. I've been super impressed with it. Obviously this deck, a lot of the reason this deck is so powerful right now is specifically because of Will, but outside of that, we're still running a lot of very generically powerful cards. I think Giver is such a great addition. Bowmasters and Peddler are really good. Fable, Seasoned Pyromancer. Seasoned Pyromancer and Crucius obviously got a lot worse with Bowmasters, but As I mentioned, I think they're important in this deck, and we do have ways to protect them as well. And then Winota is kind of the glue that holds the whole deck together, so I've been super impressed with the main deck. It's felt really strong in general, and I think Will is just so well positioned right now. So now let's have a look at the sideboard. So starting off here with 4 Pithing Needles. So I think Pithing Needle is incredibly well positioned right now because it's good against Kethis, Yawgmoth, One Ring, Samwise combo. Now running the full 4 might look really weird because it is definitely a card that has diminishing returns, and I don't bring in the full 4 copies against most matchups, but the 2 matchups where I do want 4 copies is specifically against Kethis and Yawgmoth, because Pithing Needle naming Kethis or Pithing Needle naming Yawgmoth is really good to stop the opponent comboing off, but if they can find an out to your Pithing Needle, they can often just win on the spot, right? Because they'll have all their combo pieces in play, they just can't combo off. So if they find a Haywire Might or a Boseiju and kill your Pithing Needle, you often just lose on the spot. So in those 2 matchups specifically, you actively want to find your second copy of this so that you can get 2 in play, and then even if the opponent does find an out, they then need to find a second out to the other needle before they can combo off. So specifically in those matchups, I want 4 because I want to find the second copy as often as possible. And then if we do draw the 3rd or 4th copy, it's not really too much of an issue because we can just loot it away to Fable, Season Pyromancer or Crucius. And then as I mentioned, Needle is obviously really good as well against the One Ring decks, and against Samwise combo you can name Cauldron Familiar, against Greasefang if you face that you can name Parhelion. So in other matchups I also bring in a couple as well, but full 4 copies is only for Kethis and Yawgmoth combo. Then we've got 3 copies of Remorseful Cleric as Graveyard Hate. And even though this does die to Bowmasters, that's not really too much of an issue because most of the matchups where we want this, like Kethis and Reanimator, aren't running Bowmasters anyway. And the main reason that I'm running this over, non-creature options like Soulguide Lantern or Unlicensed Curse is because it's a non-human creature, so that we can attack with this to trigger Winota, which is really huge. One of the big downsides of Pithing Needle is we have to cut creatures to make room for it, which does dilute our synergies a little bit, whereas Remorseful Cleric being a creature that we can use to trigger Winota is really huge. And then the ability for this to exile the entire opponent's graveyard at instant speed is really huge, specifically against Kethis combo, where they care a lot about having a high density of cards in the graveyard. Then we've got 4 copies of Cut Down for any matchups where we want additional interaction. So mainly this is here for matchups like Wizards and Devotion. So against Wizards, they are a lot faster than us, right? We don't have a huge impact on the board until turn 4, really. And so having 4 Cut Down in addition to 4 Fatal Push is really important at slowing the opponent's early aggression down. And then against Devotion, I felt like the best way to stop Devotion is to focus down their turn 1 elf, right? Slow down their ability to ramp, because if you end up relying on Thoughtseize or something instead, if they have 2 big top-end threats in hand, that kind of sucks. And also they can obviously top deck as well, right? I think it's more important to kill their early ramp so that even if they do draw top-end threats, they're unable to cast them. You just want to slow them down as often as possible. And Devotion is also a fairly inconsistent deck. They often have to keep sketchy hands off the back of their turn 1 elf surviving, so focusing down their turn 1 elf punishes those sorts of keeps as well. So Cut Down very important in addition to Fatal Push in those matchups. And then we've got 4 copies of Thoughtseize as well, just for additional hand disruption. So mainly here this is mainly here for matchups like Control and combo decks, but specifically against Control we normally just bring in the 4 Thoughtseize, cut the 4 Fatal Push, and then we have, Thoughtseize in addition to Juggernaut Peddler and Bowmasters, all very good, cards against Control. Specifically, Thoughtseize and Peddler should hopefully clear the way for stuff like Fable, Season Pyromancer or Crucius to resolve, and then if we can get a Winota to stick, we really start running away with the game there as well. So that's the sideboard and the deck overall. As I mentioned, I've been so happy with it. I think this deck attacks from a lot of different angles, is very explosive. We have a lot of really generically powerful cards, and being able to consistently get this into play on turn 4 is so good, specifically against the One Ring decks, but just against the meta in general. Very, very high impact card when it comes down. So that's the deck overall. Next I've got some gameplay with the deck so you guys can see it in action. Give me a shout in the comments if you've got any questions about the deck at all, and I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this sound looks pretty good to me, right? We got Peddler on turn 2, which is especially nice in combination with Crucius, because we can hopefully use the Peddler to get rid of a piece of interaction, like an opposing Bowmasters, to then clear the way for Crucius to get that first trigger, which is pretty nice. And then, we can potentially use Crucius to discard the other Crucius naming Ambitious to either hit a Will or Winota. We have Bowmasters as a non-human to trigger Winota, so definitely like this hand quite a lot. And I'm definitely going to lead on the fast lands here, right? Because if we do draw a 3rd fast land, we get really punished if we play a Blood Crypt here. So definitely going to run out the fast lands here. Okay, harvested from the opponent, so it looks like we're against Rakdos, so definitely going to slam the Peddler here, try and clear the way for Crucius, and Will is a pretty nice draw now. So if we can clear the way for Crucius, we can potentially ramp here. So One Ring and Fable. I mean, One Ring is the obvious pick here, but I'm kind of tempted to take the Fable here, because if we take the Fable, we cut them off turn 3 play, and then if they don't draw a piece of removal for Crucius in the next 2 turns, we can go Crucius, make a treasure, ramp into Will to steal their ring, and even if they find a Thoughtseize or a piece of interaction, we have Bowmasters to punish their 1 ring anyway, so even though we'd have to wait an extra turn to play the Will, I still think it's kind of worth it here. Now, it is definitely high risk, and I don't think I would take that line if I didn't have the Bowmasters, because them finding a piece of interaction for Crucius here is really bad if we have to wait until turn 5 to play Will, and we don't have the Bowmasters to punish them for playing the 1 ring. So they have got, they've got 2 draw steps here to find a removal spell for Crucius, because they can loot away the blood token here. And it also enables Fatal Push as well, so that does, increase the range of good removal spells they can find. Yikes. They do finally go for the throat, which isn't ideal here. We do thankfully have the Bowmasters to punish them for playing the ring here. Wow, they go for Juggernaut instead. Okay, that's really good for us. I mean, I guess they might think that we might have a Bowmasters or a Shielded, potentially. If they've used their removal spell on Crucius, they might be worried that we're going to play a Shielded of our own, so it kind of makes sense, but that's really, really solid for us. So now they play the 1 ring. Now we have the Bowmasters this turn, and we have the untapped land to go for Will next turn as well, so we could potentially block here, but I think we can just take 5. I mean, that is potentially punished if they have another Shielded off the top, but and I think I'm going to take the opportunity to flash in the Bowmasters now. Right, that does give them a free draw off the 1 ring without taking any additional damage off the Bowmasters, but I want to use my mana efficiently. Oh, wait. Because they have... Whoops, that was my bad. Because they have protection, I assumed that we had to target ourselves, but they obviously have the Juggernaut in play, so that was a punt. I should have obviously damaged the Juggernaut instead, so hopefully it doesn't end up mattering. Either way, we get to steal the 1 ring and attack. Actually, that is problematic here, because if they... Well, we're taking 2 damage off the 1 ring. If they play a Shielded this next turn, it's going to be pretty rough. Or if they find a removal spell for this 1/1. So yeah, I mean, hopefully that doesn't end up mattering. But either way, I'm going to pitch the Juggernaut Peddler here, because the Pyromancer is going to be good at refueling our hand if we don't find anything great. Okay, opponent has Inquisition, so they get rid of the Pyromancer here. Yikes. And they have Thoughtseize as well, so... Okay, thankfully they don't kill the 1/1 and they don't have Shielded, so it doesn't look like we're going to get punished for dealing ourselves unnecessary damage this game, hopefully. Now, the one thing that they could punish us here with is a piece of removal on the Will, but they would need exactly go for the throat to kill it here, right? Will can't be killed by Fatal Push. They don't even have a way to trigger Revolt, so... Wow, they have the Bowmasters as well. I mean, that's a pretty good draw for the opponent, because they can kill both the Bowmasters and the Crucius here, but I still think we're in a pretty good spot here, right? Oh wow, we did draw a bunch of lands, which isn't ideal. I mean, we can use the white ability on Will to reanimate Crucius if we needed. So I definitely think we're going to go for the white ability here, just to get a creature back from the graveyard. The other 2 aren't really great in this spot. The red one is only really great if you've got a Winota in play, and the black one isn't great when they have a Bowmasters in play, because they can just either take 3 or damage us. So we could get back another Will here potentially, but I think I'm just going to get back my own Bowmasters to kill theirs. We could have also gone for Crucius as well, which might have been the better line there potentially, because that is very good at filtering our draws. Just going to pass it back. I'm going to shock in the land here, and so that I can bring the tokens back with Seasoned Pyromancer. The main reason I went for Bowmasters here is just that it makes their future 1 rings a lot worse and kills one of their creatures in play. But having said that, I could definitely see an argument for getting Crucius back instead, because the draw filtering is very good. Right, the other thing with killing their Bowmasters as well is that it also opens up Seasoned Pyromancer and Fable of the Mirror Breaker as better top decks in future. So here, definitely going to block the 3/3, and then happy to trade the 3 tokens for the Juggernaut. If they have a piece of removal, then that obviously does kind of suck, but it's not that bad overall. Okay, so they find a Crucius, but they don't have anything in hand to pitch to it. Yikes. Another land isn't great here, so we are flooding out quite a lot this game. I don't think... Attacking is very risky here because they have that Den of the Bugbear. If they didn't have the Den, then I think I attack. I'm going to set Stop String the opponent's hand as well, just to bluff having something. Wow, they find a 1 ring as well. I mean, thankfully we have the Bowmasters in place, so if they do activate here, we get to kill their Crucius, which is pretty nice, so... The opponent did have a good draw, so on balance, I'm very glad that I went for the Bowmasters now. Although, having said that, Crucius would have filtered our hand a lot. Okay, sick. There we go. We found a really sick draw. So we can attack here with one of the Orcs. Going to go for the Bowmasters so that we can have the other Orc hold back. And was really hoping to hit another Will to steal their 1 ring there. Hitting another Winota doesn't really do anything here, so... But having said that, you know, if they do activate the One Ring, we get more Bowmaster's triggers. They found a Fatal Push, so really got to hope they don't find a piece of removal for Winota or the 1-1 here. So this is kind of rough. We haven't had great draws until that Winota. Wow, okay, another One Ring is actually pretty good for us here, though. It means the opponent's kind of drawing dead. And we do get another Winota trigger here, unless they find, like, land into Fatal Push. And if we do find another Will, that's a real blowout, right? We can steal their ring. I mean, we are at a fairly low life total, but... Okay, Crucius is a sick draw as well. So, just attack with the 1-1 here, get a Winota trigger, see what we hit. Wow, straight whiff. That's pretty unlucky. Because we do run a very high density of humans, so chances of that happening are pretty low. But we do have the Crucius here, so it does filter our draws. And the nice thing is now that we have a lot of pressure in play, right? So even though the opponent does have a 1 ring, and we don't have a Bowmasters anymore, you know, they're going to be start taking a lot of damage off the 1 ring, and we do have a lot of power in play as well. So hopefully they don't have a removal spell for the 1-1 here, because getting more Winota triggers should have a pretty big impact on our clock. Okay, so they thought this is away the Giver, that's completely fine. They do draw off the 1 ring, so hopefully they don't find another piece of removal here. Okay, they ship it back. Doesn't mean they don't have a piece of removal, but definitely going to be attacking in here. So we're definitely attacking with the 1-1, definitely attacking with the Winota. We do need to be careful about them attacking us back on the crackback, but I think the opponent is at such a low life total now, in combination with the ring, that we should just apply more pressure. And we do hit a Will, sick. So the question now is, do they have a Bowmaster? So if they have a Bowmasters here, they flash it in, like whether we take the 2, if we take the 2-2, then we might not have lethal. I just need to calculate. So they Bowmasters, kill the Crucius, and then they can block the Winota and the Will, which does make them survive. So... Oh, they just scoop it up, so they obviously didn't have the Bowmasters. So, I don't know. I'm still not sure what's best to take there, to be honest. But either way, we want some Pithing Needles in this matchup for sure for the 1 ring. And I think that's pretty much it. You know, the main deck is pretty well set up against this matchup. And to be honest, I'm still not 100% sure if Pithing Needle is correct to bring in, because Will stealing the 1 ring is so powerful that if we name the 1 ring with Pithing Needle, we reduce the amount of good targets that we have for Will. I mean, to be honest, like, you know, they're always going to have other creatures that we can steal, whether that's Shielded or a Crucius as well. So I still think Pithing Needle is decent in this matchup, but I could very happily just resubmit the main deck against the mid-range decks. I found this matchup to be really good from our side, because Will stealing Crucius, Will stealing Crucius the 1 ring or Shielded is really solid in this matchup. So yeah, I'm definitely going to go back and rewatch that last game just to see whether I think it's correct to steal the 2-2 or the 1 ring. So this hand's obviously missing top end, but, you know, you don't really want to be mulliganing against the Thoughtseize deck, and we have so many good draws here. We also have a decent amount of early interaction, which is really nice. Okay, sick. We hit Pithing Needle. I'm definitely just going to run out the Juggernaut Peddler first here. But don't want to attack with the Giver of Runes first, because they could flash in the Bowmasters and kill it in combat, whereas Juggernaut Peddler, we at least get the information first to know whether it's safe to attack or not. That's a pretty stacked hand. So 2 Bowmasters, 1 ring, and Shieldred. I mean, we have the Pithing Needle for the 1 ring, so we're not really concerned about that. We have our Bowmasters for one of theirs at least, so I think it's between Shieldred and Fable here. I think I'm just going to take the Shieldred. You know, there is definitely an argument to taking the Fable, because that does cut them off a good turn 3 play, but we currently don't have a good way to trigger Revolt on Fatal Push, so I think Shieldred is definitely the bigger threat at the moment. I'm not going to attack with the Giver, because Giver is actually really solid in this matchup, right? If we draw a Winota, being able to protect it from their interaction is really solid. Same with Crucius as well. So we do let them play the Fable. So again, there is maybe an argument to cutting them off the Fable and keeping them with the Shielded, so they don't really have good plays until turn 4. But I think, you know, Fable is manageable here. So we get basically a free attack with the Peddler. If they do choose to trade here, we can just give the Peddler protection with the Giver. So opponent can't really block very effectively here. So we get him for 2 damage. And then going to play the Pithing Needle, aiming the 1 ring. Obviously, we want to do it now before they can cast it and get the first draw. And then I think I'm just going to go for the Bowmasters now. Kill their Bowmasters, and then they get punished if they loot in their draw step, right? If they loot off the chapter of 2 of Fable, we get to ping them with the Bowmasters. And they can't really afford to use their Bowmasters to kill ours either, because we can just protect it with Giver of Runes. Wow, they loot 2. I mean, that's great for us. We get to kill their 2-2 here. Wow, they flash in their own Bowmasters here, which is a surprise, because if they target our Bowmasters, we can just protect it with the Giver here. So that was obviously a great exchange for us. Opponent might have punted there. Maybe they just forgot that we had the Giver of Runes in play. And they do Thoughtseize away our Fatal Push, so again, we are missing top end, but we have so many good draws here, right? Any of our 3-drops are great. Winota's great, Will is great. Another land obviously isn't ideal here. But I think we want to start applying pressure, you know, get in for more damage, so we can freely attack with the 3/3 and the 2/2 here, especially when we have the Giver in play, and then just going to run out of land here. So we are flooding out a little bit, but as I mentioned, we have so many good draws here, right? Any of our 3-drops are good. Winota's good, Will is good. Yikes, okay, Shieldred is bad if we don't draw anything good here. And that does also punish us for playing something like a Seasoned Pyromancer as well. Okay, perfect, we hit a Winota, so that's really solid. So we can play the Winota here, and then we know they don't have any mana available, so I'm just going to attack with the 3/3, see what we hit off the Winota. Okay, so we didn't hit a Will, unfortunately, but we do hit Juggernaut Peddler, which does hit their last card in their hand. Invoke Despair, so get to replace that with a Juggernaut, which is really nice. And then we could potentially use Giver to protect our 3/3 here. Although, I don't know. I don't know if that's worth it. I think I'm going to go for it. Right, this only gets punished by exactly go for the throat off the top, because they don't... Actually, they do have a way to trigger Revolt and Fatal Push, so that does get punished if they do draw Fatal Push or go for the throat. So that was probably greedy, actually. I probably shouldn't have gone for that. Okay, thankfully they drew a land, but protecting that 3/3 on balance probably wasn't that important here, really. And holding up the Giver of Runes this turn would allow us to, you know, give one of our blockers protection here. So they end up copying the Juggernaut. I think I'm just going to block with the Peddler here, just in case we get unlucky with our Winota hits. Because if we let the 3/3 die, we can still attack him with our own Bowmasters. I mean, I guess the logic with protecting the 3/3 was that protecting our Bowmasters is pretty important. Okay, we hit Will, so this is perfect. Now we get to steal their Shieldred, and now we're so far ahead on board, right? And then they don't really have good blockers for the 3/3 here either. Wow, maybe they don't realise the Will has Indestructible. They just block with the Juggernaut. Maybe they just want to preserve their life total a little bit. I feel like they probably should have blocked the Will with... Yeah, they're hovering over the Will, so I think they didn't realise. But either way, we can just specialise the Will now, and then get another Winota trigger here, which is pretty nice. We can immediately sack the Shieldred, get a second combat phase, and attack with... I think we can probably attack with the Winota now as well, and the Peddler. I mean, we need to attack with the Bowmasters as well. Maybe we just attack with everything, to be honest. They've got barely any blockers in play. Wow, we hit another Will as well. So now we can steal the Bowmasters. And yeah, that should be lethal then. Sweet, we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, I think we can keep this, right? Don't have anything that great to do proactively until turn 3, but having early interaction in Fatal Push is pretty sweet. Okay, opponent Thoughtseizes, so obviously with a land heavy hand that is a little bit rough, but against a Thoughtseize deck we're very happy to keep a 7. And having a lot of lands does mean that we, you know, basically all of the top decks in our deck are now live. Wow, they take the Will. That's kind of a surprise. I thought they'd take the Crucius for sure. I mean, that probably means they don't have early good targets for Fatal Push, which is kind of good for us. It means they probably don't have early pressure. Okay, they do have a second Thoughtseize, so... Wow, and they take the Bowmasters. Okay, so that tells me they probably have a Crucius here, right? Or they... Doesn't really make sense what they've done. Like, or they could have a Jarsil here, actually. Yeah, Jarsil Thoughtseize away Crucius is pretty rough. Yikes. Okay, so pretty good start for the opponent there. And we've obviously just drawn lands, which isn't ideal. But again, we still have a number of decent draws here. Okay, so I mean, Giver isn't great, but it does then make future top decks like Crucius slightly better, right? We can use it to protect Crucius the turn it comes down. And the opponent doesn't have a 2-drop in their graveyard for Jarsil yet. I mean, if they go like Perilous Iteration here, then that's going to be pretty bad for us, obviously. And the opponent does also have perfect information on our hand as well, so they know they don't have to play around anything here, or like they obviously have to play around Fatal Push, but it doesn't look like they've got any cheaper creatures, so... Peddler's not that high impact, but it is better than a land for sure. Getting to see what their hand is. And it looks like they're stuck on land, so they might be stuck with like One Rings and Shieldred stranded in hand here, potentially. Okay, so they flash in Bowmasters, which is fine, right? The only thing that really punishes is Seasoned Pyromancer. Wow, they got One Ring, Bloodbraid Elf, and Jarsil. So definitely going to take the One Ring here. We don't care as much about the Bloodbraid Elf. Obviously, it's kind of scary, but... One Ring when we don't have a Shieldred or a Winota is a lot more of an issue. And if they keep missing their 4th land, they don't have anything to do here, right? They don't want to play the second Jarsoul. I guess they could Thoughtseize, but they know what our hand is, right? So, actually, maybe I'm supposed to block and use the Giver Protection there. Yeah, that was probably a mistake on my part. I should have just used that. Yikes. Okay, we're not drawing particularly well this game, unfortunately. I mean, I think we've got a free attack with the Peddler, though. Having said that, the opponent is also stuck on lands, but I think, Screw generally beats Flood, because when they do find their land, they have so much gas in hand to be able to just completely refuel. Okay, opponent lets the damage through, that's fine, and then... Don't know whether to shock in the Sacred Foundry here. I think I will. I want to have access to both Push and Sokenzan here, so that if we do chump block with one of our tokens, we can Fatal Push a Crucius potentially. So hopefully they attack... Oh, they don't attack with the Jarsoul. So unfortunately we don't have a way to trigger Fatal Push, which is a bit annoying, and now they start getting Crucius triggers, so now their hand's going to get unlocked pretty quickly. Either way, we get to channel in the Sokenzan, so really need a good draw here. Oh, perfect. Okay. I mean, to be fair, we did draw pretty bad the past few turns. So hitting Winota here, kind of overdue, but we get to attack in here. Oh, wow. Straight whiff. I mean, that's pretty unlikely, but thankfully we have we have 3 non-humans in play, but we want to hopefully hold the Giver to protect the Winota. The opponent is down to 9, so I don't feel too bad about this spot now. We have a good way to protect Winota. We have multiple non-humans in play. They do play the Brotherly Elf, and they have to use a treasure, so they're missing land drops again. They do find a removal spell, so they probably have to go for the Giver here. Well, they go for Winota, so we just get to protect the Winota here with the Giver. And, assuming... Well, as long as they don't have a Fatal Push in hand, I feel pretty good about this spot. Even with Fatal Push, they have to use Push on Giver, which then enables us to attack with the... Oh, right, they can flash back the Power Word kill with Jarsoul. I completely missed that. So if they do have Crucius activation into Fatal Push here, that is going to be pretty rough for us, but if we can untap and get another Winota trigger, I think we've got a decent way to recover here. Now, we could actually maybe, we could have used Fatal Push on the Crucius to deny them the treasure to stop them playing Fatal Push here, but the risk with doing that is that they can then just use Jarsoul to get back the Crucius next turn. So I think it makes more sense to do this, and, we get punished by exactly Fatal Push, but I don't think we can really afford to play around everything at that point, and letting them use Jarsoul to get back Crucius is pretty bad. So here we get Crucius in play, we get an activation, and we find a Will. Okay, perfect. That's really good. So as long as they don't have Thoughtseize, Will is going to make a really big impact here. Okay, they play Shielded, so that's a perfect Will target. I think we probably have to do it pre-combat. So, well, first of all, we've got to pray they don't have a Thoughtseize here. But I think we want to use the Will to take the Shielded pre-combat, just so they have fewer blockers in play. And then if we find... Oh no, we can't specialise Will because we don't have enough mana to do it this turn. I was going to say we could potentially try and get 2 Winota triggers. We also only have 1 non-human here, so that won't really work out, but still feel really good about this spot. I think we can afford to attack with everything while the opponent's down at 6 as well. And... Oh wow, opponent just scoops it up. Okay, sweet. Even after, rough draws in the early game, we managed to get there. So... I think I want to bring in a couple of Pithing Needle here and probably trim... we've seen Bowmaster, so Pyromancer isn't as good here. I mean, it's always tricky to figure out what to cut here because... Seasoned Pyromancer is kind of rough into Bowmasters, but it being a human that can make non-humans for Winota is pretty nice. Having said that, it is kind of awkward in your opening hand because... especially if the opponent does have Thoughtseize, they can often put you in a point where if you cast Seasoned Pyromancer on turn 3, you have to discard a Winota if you only have, a Winota and a land left in your hand, so... I don't mind cutting a couple here, but I could definitely see trimming other stuff instead, because, like I said, Pyromancer has become worse since Bowmasters, but it being able to be a hit-off Winota that can create tokens that can trigger Winota is really nice, and if the opponent doesn't have a Bowmasters, it's still a generically really strong card. I've won multiple games with this deck with Reflection plus Seasoned Pyromancer, just allowing us to completely pull ahead on card advantage in the late game. But yeah, I think our main deck is really, really well set up against the mid-range decks. I think I've only lost once against the Rakdos mid-range deck, and that was just to really bad variance on my part. So this definitely feels like a really good matchup to me. Honestly, the matchup spread has been pretty good with this deck. I think since changing the sideboard to have 4 Pithing Needles, I feel pretty favoured against the combo decks, which is, you know, the other kind of scary decks. The two matchups that I felt the most sketch with against are Mono Green Devotion and Is It Wizards. I think Devotion is always rough for these sorts of slightly slower decks to develop, because if they draw well, they can just go way over the top. And Wizards, similarly, you know, both those matchups, you really rely heavily on your Fatal Pushes and your Cut Downs. So overall, the matchup spread has felt pretty good against the most common decks in the format. And I've still, you know, fairly consistently beaten Wizards and Devotion as well. So I'm really happy with how this deck is positioned overall. So this hand isn't bad. And, you know, typically against the Thoughtseize deck, I don't want to mulligan it anyway. So even if this hand was slightly worse, I'd still maybe consider keeping it. But yeah, Double Bowmasters and Crucius is great. Peddler is also really nice on turn 2 to enable us to hopefully resolve the Crucius and have it survive. So we're going to lead on the Peddler here, just to see what the opponent has. You know, hopefully clear the way for this Crucius here. Strip away any Bowmasters they've got to enable us to resolve it, or any, like, go for the throats or whatever. Okay, we force them to flash out the Bowmasters now, which is really good, because that, you know, if we can take a removal spell here, we might be able to clear the way for Crucius. That's a pretty good hand from the opponent. I mean, they don't have anything to cast off Jarsoul here, but if we take Jarsoul, then they need to find a 4th land to cast anything here. So I'm going to take the Jarsoul just because, just on tempo reasons, to be honest, right? Because if they don't find the 4th land, or they don't have a good 3-drop to play, oh, yikes. Okay. Immediately punished. I was going to say, if they don't find another land drop or a 3-drop here, I guess, you know, chances of them finding one of those two are pretty high. So maybe that was a greedy keep, but yeah, think about it. Maybe I'm supposed to take Shelly or Bloodbraid Elf there. That was maybe a mistake on my part. And now if they have a Fatal Push as their last card, we're in trouble. But it doesn't look like they do. We can tell from Arena giving away priority there. Either way, we can... I think with Bowmasters in play, I want to pitch Seasoned Pyromancer, but I definitely want to pitch a 3-drop Naming Ambitious, specifically because I want to hit Will here, right? If they cast if they cast Shieldred, we have the will to steal it immediately. So yeah, thinking about it, I'm probably supposed to take Bloodbraid Elf with that Juggernaut Peddler activation. Although having said that, you know, if they found the Crucius off the top, then they can, you know, fairly easily find 1-drops to recast off the Jarsoul, like Abundant Harvest. So yeah, thinking about it, I'm probably supposed to take Bloodbraid Elf there. So that was maybe a mistake, but hopefully it shouldn't end up mattering. So unfortunately, we don't have a great target for Will here. I really want to save this Will for the Shieldred. So we could just go double Bowmasters here, which isn't too bad, right? We can kill both the Crucius and the Bowmasters here, which is pretty decent, right? I'm going to do it now, just because, I mean, I don't think it really makes a difference waiting, to be honest. Maybe I'm supposed to wait, but I think doing it now and also enables me to attack with the Peddler, which is probably enough of an upside. You know, there isn't really much upside to waiting apart from concealing information. And now, if they do go for Shielded, we can steal it immediately. If they go for Jarsoul, there's maybe an argument to stealing that. I mean, we don't have a good 2-drop in the graveyard to get back at the moment. If they kill a Bowmasters here, then that's maybe an argument, but they go for a land, which makes me think maybe they're going to go, you know, shocking the Blood Crypt into Shieldred, which I'd be pretty happy to see, right? We can just steal the Shieldred HUD. Looks like they're thinking about not doing that. Although they do shock in the Blood Crypt here, so maybe they are just going to go for it anyway. Yeah, okay, sweet. So they cast the Shieldred here, which gives us a really solid target for the Will now. So definitely just going to jam the Will, steal the Shieldred here. And then I think I'm also just going to cast the Giver as well, right? If that can untap, that can protect our Will going into the Specialized turn, which is pretty important. Don't think we want to attack here, and then I'm just going to pitch Crucius again. You know, hitting a Winota or a Will here is really good. Okay, we hit Winota, which is great. I mean, I think we obviously do have to Specialize the Will here, but Giver of Runes makes that a lot less risky, right? If they do have a go for the Throat or Heartless Act that they're sandbagging, we can just protect the Will here, and then if we find an untapped land off the top, then that's pretty interesting, because then we can go Winota. I guess if we find an untapped land, we can't use the red specialization. I was going to say, using Winota with the red specialization, getting 2 Winota triggers here would be really strong, but we can't do that, because if we do find an untapped land, we have to go for the white or black specialization, because we'd be discarding the Juggernaut Peddler. But either way, I think we're in a really solid position here, right? The only thing I'm slightly worried about is 1 ring from the opponent's side, but we have 2 Bowmasters and a Shieldred, so that's not really an issue. Wow, they use their own will, stealing a Shieldred. And they do get back Bowmasters, killing Crucius. So that was a pretty good turn for the opponent. I don't think we get the Shieldred back here, right? I mean, either way, now we can just go for Winota. We don't even need to worry about needing to specialize the will here, which is pretty nice. So I think I'm going to lead on Fatal Push, killing the Shieldred here. I don't think we'd get the Shieldred back. They would probably keep it, right? If I understand that interaction. But either way, we're going to attack him with the 2/2 Orc here, get a Winota trigger. Wow, we find will. Okay, that's so solid here, because now we can use the will to steal Jarsil, and then we can use, we can deny them getting back a 3-drop with their Jarsil, and we can get back our own Crucius here off their Jarsil, which is pretty sick. Not going to use the Giver Range Protection here, because we have multiple other non-humans in play, and I'd much rather use the Giver to protect, our Winota, for example, in case they have a second will, or like a Go for the Throat or Heartless Act. But yeah, now we can use Jarsil to get back Crucius, and then we can specialize will. We could use the white specialization to get another creature back. They're already at 8, so we could maybe use the black specialization to... They're probably forced to let us draw 3 here. Although, actually, no, they have the Bowmasters in play. That's bad. So probably want to go for the white specialization. But, yeah, with this Giver in play, I feel like it's really hard for us to get blown out by interaction here. So opponent's in the tank, but it is a tricky spot for them, for sure. They do find another Shielded, which isn't bad. But, I think we're still ahead at this point, right? We're still going to be getting another Winota trigger. Wow, okay, they go for the black specialization, so we either give them draw 3, which would be really... that would basically stop us from winning, I think, because they'd gain 6 life. I think we just have to take the 5 here and try and win next turn now. So them finding that Shielded is very good for them. I think we just have to take the damage and try and win next turn here. But we can use Giver to force an attack through potentially, although they do have creatures of multiple colours here. So, well, I mean, we'll see what we draw first, but I think we've got a good chance of being able to win this turn, I think. Finding a Sacred Foundry is also pretty nice, because now we can use the red specialization on will. So I think... I'm going to preemptively activate the Giver on the will, naming black here, so that they can only block it with the Bloodbraid Elf. And now with this Sacred Foundry, that top deck was actually really big here, because now we go... Jarsil will get back Crucius, and then we can attack with will and a Bowmasters to get a first Winota trigger. Then main phase 2, we can specialize the will, sacking the Jarsil to get another attack trigger, and then we can go a bit more all-in, I think. Sounds like the best line. And again, they can't block the will with more than the Bloodbraid Elf here, so it's a kind of a free attack with the will. Oh, wow, we whiff. Okay, that kind of sucks. I mean, thankfully we do get a second Winota trigger here, though, so... Main phase 2, we can specialize will here, go for the red specialization, and at this point, actually, since we need to win this turn, we probably just want to sack the Crucius or the Giver. Wow, opponent just scoops it up. But yeah, we managed to get that. That was pretty sweet. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this looks decent, right? We got Peddler or Bowmasters on turn 2. Pyromancer to try and bridge the gap towards will as well, which is pretty nice. But yeah, we'll see what the opponent's on here. Peatland. Sure, into Halfling, so that makes me think they're probably on Yawgmoth. Okay, Giver Rune's decent, it gives us something to do on turn 1. And also, protects a little bit more if we do draw a Crucius or Winota. Especially if they have a Bowmasters in response to our Pyromancer, that's nice to have access to, but especially having Juggernaut Peddler on turn 2 when they have a Halfling here is really important, because the cards we're most worried about here are Yawgmoth and One Ring, so getting Peddler down on turn 2 hopefully, shuts them off that unless they have both in hand, which would be kind of rough. But yeah, we'll see what they got going on here. Because with Yawgmoth, if you can keep them off their top end cards, they've just got a bunch of small creatures, so... Oh, wow. Okay, that kind of sucks. I mean, we're not too worried about Cord. They can only get a 2-drop at the moment. So I think what we should focus on is taking either the One Ring or Shieldred. Now, we do have a Will, but we're pretty far away from casting it. So I think we just get rid of the get rid of the ring, let them have Shieldred. So if they do... Oh, no, wait, they have exactly 4 mana here already. So they can cast Shieldred or Ring this turn, even if they miss a land drop. But yeah, taking the Ring is definitely best here. I mean, we do have Bowmasters in hand, but... You know, we don't have to worry too much about Shieldred. We don't even need to worry about it attacking, really, because we can just block and give the Peddler protection with the Giver. The annoying thing here is that Pyromancer is a lot worse. So I think I'm just going to go Bowmaster, you know, with the Shieldred in play because we take a lot of damage off it. So I think we're just going to go for Bowmasters, play a tap land here, and then we might not even play the Pyromancer. We might just, you know, see what we draw next turn. Hopefully a non-land that we can cast. And then just, you know, save the Will for the Shieldred here. Now, I wanted to take out the Innkeeper main phase just to give them less options of Chord of Calling, right? Because if they have the Innkeeper in play, they can get a 3-drop here, potentially. Whereas taking the Innkeeper out, they can only get a 2-drop at the moment. Okay, they do cast the Juggernaut, which is, you know, completely fine because we can give our creatures protection from Colourless as well with Giver. So we don't really need to worry about the opponent's attacks. I mean, we'd have really liked to either draw an untapped land so that we can at least channel the Sokenzan, or a non-land that we could cast this turn. So that kind of sucks. We basically just do nothing this turn. Because we can, you know, we could obviously Shock in the Godless Shrine, channel the Sokenzan, but then we don't have an untapped 5th land for Will, and Will seems super important here. So attack with the Juggernaut. I think I'll just double block and then give the Peddler protection from Colourless here. Obviously could get slightly blown out if they have a Fatal Push, but... You know, I think we can't really afford to play around it that much, I don't think. I guess they could also Chord for a Bowmasters here, right? To kill the 1-1, but that's still not amazing for the opponent. It feels like a bit of a waste of their Chord, to be honest. I guess they could have also used the Chord before they were forced to attack with the Juggernaut. So here I'm going to use the Sokenzan just to not take any excess damage. Maybe it's safe to just Shock in the Godless Shrine, but... You know, with 2 Seasoned Pyromancers in hand, I doubt I'm going to channel the Sokenzan. I think I've got a lot of stuff to do with my mana here anyway. So it looks like opponent's thinking about using Chord. And they do Chord for 2, so what is that going to be? Maybe Hepatra in case they do draw a Yawgmoth. Probably be my guess here. Or maybe a Bowmasters to kill my Bowmasters, but then we have Giver to protect it. Okay, Fiend Artisan kind of makes sense. So that's a little bit annoying because they can now use the Fiend Artisan to tutor Yawgmoth. And, you know, we obviously have a Shieldred in place, so that is good against Yawgmoth, but we're basically forced to sack this Shieldred next turn anyway. I mean, thankfully we have the Giver to protect the Will to guarantee the specialization, which is nice. But, and the other nice thing, the other nice thing for us about Fiend Artisan is it's not instant speed, right? They have to do it during their turn if they're going to activate it, so it's not like we can get caught out, you know, them tutoring up a Bowmasters at instant speed or something like that. Okay, so they choose not to tutor up the Yawgmoth, which I'm pretty happy about. It gives us more time. Oh, wow. Okay, that's a sick draw. And now we can potentially get 2 Winota activations. So I'm going to Shock in the Godless Shrine here, play the Winota, and then we can attack with the Bowmaster to get a Winota trigger. Oh, no, sorry. Attack with the Shieldred first, because we're going to be sacking that. So yeah, we can attack with the Shieldred, then specialize the Will to get another combat step, sacrifice the Shieldred, get another Winota trigger here. Even if the opponent has a removal spell for the Winota, we can protect it with the Giver here, which is great. So I think we just attack with the Shieldred here, because if they double block the Will, then we have to give their Shieldred back, which is pretty rough. So here, I think I like going for Seasoned Pyromancer, because... actually, no, I'm going to go for Crucius. I mean, Seasoned Pyromancer does gain us 4 life, but I think we just want to maximize the damage this turn, because I think we've got a very realistic chance of winning here, potentially. Right, if we get another good Crucius trigger, because then we can attack with more creatures next turn, I think. Oh, sorry, next combat step, I mean. So now we specialize the Will, sacrifice the Shieldred. Maybe it's better to go for the Seasoned Pyromancer, actually. Maybe the 4 life will be relevant. I'm not 100% sure. So yeah, we sacrifice the Shieldred here, get another combat step, then we can attack with the Bowmasters. I mean, we could potentially attack with everything here, force through even more damage. Okay, opponent does have a Bowmasters of their own, so they're going to target our Bowmasters. If they do, we just protect it with the Giver here, right? Yeah, so they're trying to deny us the non-human, the second Winota trigger. So I think we just attack with the Bowmasters and the Will now. You know, I don't want to just trade the Winota with the Fiend Artisan, although maybe I do actually. Maybe I'm supposed to attack with the Winota here, because if they do trade with the Fiend Artisan, then they can't get Yawgmoth for next turn, but yeah, maybe that's better. I'm not 100% sure, because the issue here is that they can tutor up Yawgmoth, sacrifice the Halfling. Although I still think we're fine at that point, right? They don't have that many creatures in play. I mean, they can also use Yawgmoth to get rid of the Giver. Then we don't have a Winota target to attack with. But then they would have to sacrifice 2 creatures, and then they wouldn't have... Yeah, I think we're fine overall, right? I think they would need... Yeah, I can't really think of a sequence that saves them here, to be honest, right? They can obviously tutor up the Yawgmoth, which does have protection from humans. So, you know, they can just freely block the Will, for example, with the Yawgmoth. But if they use the Yawgmoth activation here, you know, they're going down life for a start. And it means less blockers. I mean, obviously they can use the Fiend Artisan here. Wow, they sacked the Young Wolf. So now they only have 2 blockers in place, so we should just win here, right? We can also give Will protection from black, which should also do it, right? Like, if we give Will protection from black... I mean, we don't get a Winota trigger there, but... Just trying to think the most guaranteed way of doing this. Because for them to stop this, they would have to... Like, they can obviously activate Yawgmoth in response, but... Yeah, so I think this is the safest way to do it here. We could have just attacked with everything, and I'm pretty sure that gets us there as well. But this way should also just win us the game, right? So they can freely block the Winota, but yeah, we get 3 for 7 here, so... Definitely an interesting game, though. I feel like we were far enough ahead where we had multiple choices, so it didn't really end up mattering. But I might go back and rewatch the game just to try and figure out the most optimal choice. So this is definitely one of the matchups where we want the 4 Pithing Needle for sure. You know, we want to find the second copy. And I think in terms of trims, can afford to go down a couple of Seasoned Pyromancer and a Fable. And I think I'm going to trim one of the Wills here because... It's not that great. I mean, I guess it's good against Shielded, but if they're... Well, it's good against the Ring for a start, but if they're running Ring, that probably means they don't have that many Shielded in the deck. If Will could steal Yawgmoth, then it would be a slam dunk in this matchup, but because Yawgmoth has protection from humans, I think this is a matchup where Will is slightly less powerful. I mean, obviously, if they're running the 4 Ring, it's still good there as well, but we can also Pithing Needle naming the Ring, although actually I think that's probably a trap. You should almost always name Yawgmoth unless the opponent has an active Ring in play. So this hand's just too slow, unfortunately. This we can keep, though. Tough to know what to put back here, though. I really want to keep the 3 lands. I think I'm going to put back the Peddler here. I think it's between the Peddler and the Bowmasters, but with Winota in hand, I kind of want the Bowmasters because it's a non-human for Winota. There's also definitely an argument for putting back the Crucius, and there's an argument to be made about putting back the Winota as well, but... I think I like this configuration. Wow, okay, especially against Fiend Artisan. This is sick. So now we just get to main phase the Bowmasters and just kill the Fiend Artisan, which is such a blowout. Like, that feels like such a good exchange for us. And then we can either go Crucius or Fable, depending on if they hold mana open, probably. And then just Winota the next turn seems a pretty nice curve out. And yeah, I think if you can keep the opponent off a high density of creatures in the early game, it's, you know, pretty decent. Obviously, if the opponent has a Ring here, that's going to be kind of rough. But if we can keep, you know, the scary thing from... the Yawgmoth deck is if they can build up a wide board, Yawgmoth off the top is so powerful, so keeping fewer creatures in play is pretty good. Okay, they've got Lurrus, interesting. So, I think I'm going to go Crucius here, and then there is potentially an argument to discarding the Winota to guarantee a Will, but I think Winota's so good here that I might just pitch Fable, naming Ambitious, and then we've got a more than 50% chance of finding a Will. Okay, perfect. And we found the Will, so now we can potentially steal the Lurrus here, which doesn't get anything back from the graveyard, but stops the opponent from playing from the graveyard, which seems pretty big. So I assume the opponent replays the Fiend Artisan here, maybe. Wow, they don't play anything with Lurrus. That's kind of a surprise. Okay, they tutor up Bowmasters to kill the Crucius. That makes sense. So we got an interesting choice here, whether we want to go for Winota or Will. Like, Will is definitely the safer play, but if they have a Ring in hand or a Shieldred, we're kind of in trouble. So I think this is really close, but I think I'm going to go for the Winota here. Although actually, I mean, we'll see what we hit. Maybe we get paid off for it. Okay, perfect. We hit the Will. That's really good. So we steal the Lurrus here, stops them getting the Bowmasters back. So, I mean, we did get paid off for playing the Winota. My thought process there was, I feel like we're ahead enough here where the main thing I'm going to be losing to is a Ring or a Shieldred. So holding on to the Will is good there, but had I whiffed off the Winota, that would have also been really bad. You know, hitting Will was obviously, you know, best possible here, but, you know, had we hit a Crucius or a Seasoned Pyromancer, that's not great. Juggernaut Peddler is also good in this situation, though, so definitely a risk. I think the safer play is to go for Will, steal the Lurrus, but then we're kind of left a bit vulnerable to One Ring or Shieldred. Again, not 100% sure. Maybe that was a mistake. Okay, they pile on the Will, so they will be getting... I mean, we don't have enough mana to cast and specialise this second Lurrus here, unfortunately, but... I could just steal their 1-1 and attack with everything here, right? That gets him for a lot of damage. It gets the Winota trigger, but... this might be a bit greedy. Okay, I mean, we whiffed. That was maybe a mistake at the end, but managed to get there in the end anyway. I mean, we would have probably put too much pressure on that they wouldn't be able to recover, but we'll take it. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, I think this sound looks pretty good, right? We obviously don't have much top end, but give it into Peddler with 2 pieces of removal is pretty good. We have a lot of good draws here as well, right? Any of our 3-drops are great. Winota's great. Will is obviously a little bit expensive, but, you know, a lot of good draws from this point. And we have a lot of early interaction, which is definitely relevant in a lot of matchups. So I'm very happy we kept 7 against the Thoughtseize deck. Okay, they take the Peddler, and we draw another one, classic. So run out the Giver on turn 1 here, and then hopefully we draw a 3-drop in the next couple turns. That'd be great. Okay, perfect. I mean, Pyromancer is kind of sketchy. I mean, thankfully we have the Peddler here to try and get rid of Orcish Bowmasters if the opponent has it, but they can very well flash it in instead, you know. I've had a very common play pattern where the opponent does flash in Bowmasters in response to Peddler. Okay, they just choose to kill the Giver instead, which is fine. Interesting. So Crucius and Shieldred. I think we just take the Crucius here, right? Deny them a turn 3 play, and then we leave them stranded with 2 4-drops. So we obviously know they have enough lands to cast them, but this just slows them down. Just got to hope they don't have Bowmasters here. If they've drawn Bowmasters the past turn, that's going to be kind of rough. But otherwise, we can just go for Seasoned Pyromancer. Okay, they just go for Shieldred's Edict. Perfect. So now we can resolve Pyromancer, and I'm definitely going to keep one of these Fatal Pushes, because if we can draw like a Crucius off this, then we can go Crucius, trigger Revolt on Fatal Push. Okay, perfect. We did. We found it. So if the opponent slams Shieldred here, we have a way to kill it straight away, which is great. And they do. So that's sick. We can now just go Crucius, play a tap land. Very important to set a stop during the end step, because, you know, we don't want to allow them to gain extra life if we can avoid it. Then we just pitch the Sacred Foundry, name Ambitious. Okay, Giver's not the best hit, but we get to Fatal Push the Shieldred, and now I feel pretty good, right? They've obviously got an unknown card, but, you know, we're ahead on board. We have an active Crucius here. Okay, second Shieldred's kind of annoying. Winota's a pretty good one, though, right? Especially if we can hit a Will here. So we'll just attack with the token. This is our only non-human, but we hit Will. Okay, sick. So now we're really far ahead, right? Puts them down to 13. Get to loot away this Giver of Rings for something else. They go down to 11 off the Shieldred, and we have a lot of power in play. And, you know, typically Rakdos doesn't run sweepers, so... yeah, okay, sweet, we got there. Nice. So sideboarding here, I mean, I have to assume they're running the One Ring, so maybe bringing in Pithing Needle's fine, but, you know, having not seen the One Ring, I'm just going to run it back. And to be honest, I'm still not 100% sure the optimal way to sideboard against midrange, because Pithing Needle is decent against the One Ring, but being able to steal it with Will and activate it is pretty nice as well. So I think the main deck is very well set up against midrange. If I do see the Ring, then I'll definitely bring in a couple Pithing Needles, but, you know, there's a chance. I have seen some builds of midrange that aren't running the One Ring, so maybe it's best to preemptively bring it in, but again, I think our main deck is very well set up against theirs anyway, so I'm happy just resubmitting. And, you know, in general, I think the quality... the main card that just gives us the big edge in this matchup is obviously Will, but in general, I think our threats are just generally better than theirs. You know, they rely on a lot of single target removal as well, whereas we're a lot more proactive, so we're committing to the board more than them in general. And yeah, just stuff like Winota allows us to get ahead on advantage, but Will is just the most important card in this matchup, you know. Basically just completely won us that last game. I mean, I think we'd have still been fine had we hit something else off the Winota there, but, you know, it just swung the tempo race so far in our favour. I can't keep a one-lander. Mulliganing against the Thoughtseize deck does kind of suck, but... Oh, wow, okay. I mean, I really don't want to ever go below a 6 against the Thoughtseize deck. So this hand obviously does need us to draw black mana, but I think it's worth the risk, right? You know, chances are we're going to draw the third land on curve. Okay, perfect. We found the black land. You know, we are running a lot of each source as well, so chances of us finding it were fairly high there, I think. So definitely going to run out the Peddler on turn 2 here, see what's up. Getting it down before their turn 3 is huge as well, to potentially hit their Fable of the Mirror Breaker or Crucius or something like that. Okay, they fire off Fatal Push in response, which is fine. And they've got Crucius, Meat Hook, and Seasoned Pyromancer. I mean, even though we've got Bowmasters in hand, I'm going to take the Crucius here because, you know, the exchange you want to get off Bowmasters versus Crucius is killing the Crucius before it gets the first trigger. If we let them untap, they get that first trigger off Crucius, which is really rough. There is maybe an argument because, you know, Bowmasters is also really good against Pyromancer as well, but the fact that we couldn't Bowmasters before the first trigger definitely makes me prefer getting rid of their Crucius there. So we get to play our Crucius while they're tapped out, which is pretty huge, and then I think I'm going to pitch the Crucius naming Ambitious to try and find a Will. We did find a Winota, which is a bit awkward, but we have the Bowmasters here that we can potentially use to trigger the Winota. There's also maybe an argument to pitching the Seasoned Pyromancer instead because, you know, it is a lot worse against opposing Bowmasters, but... okay, they have Shieldred here. We draw a tap land, so that's kind of rough. I think... I'm not 100% sure what to do here. I think I'm going to pitch the Pyromancer and go Greater to try and hit a Will, which we do find. And then we can also flash in the Bowmasters here to give us ways to trigger Winota as well. So opponent attacks him with everything. I think since we have the fourth land and the second treasure here, I'm gonna fire off both Bowmasters here just to preserve my life total because, you know, if the opponent follows this up with a Thoughtseize or something and they take the Will, we don't just want to be dying to the Shieldred here. And I think we're kind of forced to block the Shieldred with the Orc token. I want to keep both Bowmasters alive just so we don't die, or just so we can punish them for having the ring. We do go down to 8 and then 6 off the Shieldred here, so maybe this is a bit risky in terms of our life total, but with both a Will and a Winota in hand, I think we should be good, right? You know, if they take the Will with a Thoughtseize, we can still take the... we can still go Winota attack, try and find another Will to deal with their Shieldred. And the other reason I want to keep both Bowmasters alive is because if they have... I was going to say, obviously now they have a treasure for Crucius, then... you know, it doesn't really matter. But if they hadn't played the Crucius there, we could have gone Winota and had 2 creatures, so they can't just Fatal Push one of the Bowmasters to deny us the Winota trigger. So just going to go for the Will here, steal the Shieldred to stop us, you know, losing any more life. I think I'm going to attack with both Bowmasters. Maybe this is really greedy as well. Actually, thinking about it, that was definitely a mistake. I just got too hasty there. Because now if they have like 2 removal spells, we're just taking a ton of damage here unnecessarily. Hopefully it won't end up mattering, but we'll see. Like my logic was, I'm unlikely to block with the Bowmasters, so I might as well attack, and I'd also take the trade with Crucius, but if they happen to have 2 go for the throats here, we're in real trouble. Okay, they got Ring. I mean, they surely can't activate it here, right? They're probably going to wait for us to specialize the Will before doing so. And if we can't find an untapped land here, we can't... I guess it doesn't really matter, right? I was going to say we can't attack with Shieldred to trigger the Winota, but shouldn't really matter too much. You know, if we had an extra land, we can specialize and cast the Winota to get a trigger is what I'm trying to get at here. But I think we're forced to use the specialize. I mean, we could potentially specialize white, discarding Winota and reanimate the Winota to get a Winota trigger. But I'm not sure that's better than guaranteeing a Crucius, potentially. So I think I'm going to pitch the Peddler instead here. Maybe it's better to get back the Winota, but then we have to sacrifice it. It's only really worth it if we hit exactly Will off the Winota trigger anyway. And we could get back Giver of Runes, which does then have haste to protect our creatures. Which also seems pretty nice, because then we can guarantee protect Winota for next turn, which is, you know, seems pretty reasonable. And we still have 2 Bowmasters in play, so I'm not too concerned about the ring. I think I'm going to go for another Will here as well, just to guarantee that we can steal the ring if we need to. But we are at a pretty low life total, so stealing the ring when it will presumably be on 2 counters is kind of risky unless we sacrifice it immediately. So then we get the Bowmasters triggers here, can take out the Crucius, which is pretty nice. And then just ship it back. I mean, to be honest, maybe we don't even need to steal the 1 ring at this point, because the opponent is likely going to be dying to it, especially if they can't kill the Bowmasters here. So maybe we could just use Will to steal whatever creature they play. So we got 2 Bowmasters triggers, going to ping down the Pyromancer here. Okay, sweet, opponent just scoops it up, nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this looks decent, right? Early interaction to Bowmasters into Pyromancer seems pretty decent. Okay, very glad that we got the turn 1 Fatal Push here. So Forest Halfling could be Yawgmoth, could be Devotion maybe. Okay, second Forest into nothing makes me think we're probably against Devotion here if I had to guess. Yeah, okay, definitely against Devotion, so... I mean, thankfully they didn't have another Dork there. I mean, if they had Llanowar or Elvish Mystic, these Bowmasters would have been really sick. Definitely going to run out the Fable here, because we want to be able to ramp into Will next turn. Just got to hope they don't have a Khan here, because that denies us the treasure, which would be kind of rough. Okay, another Old Growth Troll's fine, I think. And they choose to attack, which I think I'm alright with. Okay, looting. So I think I'm going to pitch a land and a Pyromancer here. I kind of want to keep the Bowmasters in case they play any more mana dorks, just to deny them some more mana. And then we're definitely attacking with the 2-2. I think I'm happy for them to block the Bowmasters here. Because then we can continue producing mana off the 2-2. And regardless of what they block with, we can just go Will, steal that Old Growth Troll next turn, which does deny them 3 Devotion, which is huge, right? Old Growth Troll is normally pretty resilient, because they still get to keep the Devotion even if it's brought back from the graveyard. But getting to steal it here does mean that, you know, the best they can do next turn is like a Cavalier of Thorns rather than a Storm the Festival. But yeah, we'll see what they've got. Okay, they do have a Cavalier, which is obviously pretty good. And they whiff, but they hit a Storm the Festival and a Cityscape Leveler, so... kind of rough here a little bit. I mean, we can obviously specialise Will, which we probably have to, because we don't want to give them the Devotion back. And that does mean that we can't really use Bowmasters to kill the Cavalier here. You know, if this Blackleaf Kiss was a Blood Crypt, I probably want to attack with the 2-2 here, so that if they do block with the Cavalier, we can use double Bowmasters to kill it. Okay, they let the damage through anyway, which is fine. And then we obviously go for the Black Specialization, and they'll probably take the 5 here, but we do have decent reach with Bowmasters and stuff like that, so maybe they let us draw 3 here, which would obviously be ideal. But I think, you know, with the Old Growth Troll and the Cavalier, I imagine they're probably just going to take the 5 here. If I had to guess, anyway. Wow, they let us draw 3, okay. I mean, that does make it harder to kill them. I guess that does make sense, because I am concerned about their inevitability, right? They definitely have the advantage as the game goes on, so they probably recognise that and figure that it's better to give us the cards than risk them going down to 7 and us just attacking around their creatures. So we could go for Fable or Bowmaster, or Giver plus Bowmasters here. I think I like going Giver plus Bowmasters, because if they have like Kiora into a bunch of draw effects, then we can punish them with the Bowmasters for that. Okay, they got Polukranos, so they've got 9 Devotion here, which is pretty scary. Not quite enough for a Storm. Oh, they have a Storm the Festival in hand as well, so... opponent's drawn pretty well this game, which is kind of unfortunate. Just gotta hope they don't do very well off this Storm. Oh, wow, okay. So that's pretty rough. They get a Cavalier and a Nykthos, which then means that they can flashback at least one of these Storm the Festivals, maybe even more if they hit well off them. So they've now got 13 mana. So this game is going to be a tall order to win, right? I think it was definitely the right choice for the opponent. Oh, wow, that's another really good hit. Especially if they hit a Nykthos. Okay. Another Nykthos, so we're probably not going to win this, but we'll make them play it out, see what they fetch off Karn. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think the opponent probably made the right choice taking the 5 there. Although having said that, if they whiffed on the first Storm the Festival, maybe not. Oh, okay. So yeah, we're basically just dead to the Akroma's Memorial here. I mean, I'll play it out just to see what they've got. So for example, I didn't know they were on Hollowhenge Wrangler. You know, had we conceded, we'd have had less information. I mean, to be fair, the opponent probably could have just won by just casting the Memorial anyway, right? But yeah, we'll see if they cast anything else just to get a bit more information about their deck. But yeah, this matchup is pretty swingy, to be honest. It is one of the few decks I've lost to so far with this particular build. Because as you can see, they can just go way over the top of us. I mean, I do think they drew pretty well, but post-sideboard, we definitely have more of a chance because we can bring in, you know, I think cut down and fatal push is super important at just slowing them down. Because as you saw, they have the inevitable late game, so we need to slow them down to give us more time. So I think here I'm going to trim... I'm not really sure because, you know, bringing in 4 non-creatures does dilute our synergies quite a lot, but... And Giver of Runes, I mean, Giver of Runes can be used to force through damage, right? We can give our creatures protection from green, which allows us to attack, but the main reason we've got Giver in the deck is to provide some protection against interaction, which isn't really that relevant in this matchup. And we're bringing in 4 1-drops as well, so we ideally want to have a piece of interaction on turn 1 rather than using a Giver. We are on the play here, though, which does mean that, for example, Orcish Bowmasters is a way to kill their turn 1 Dork, assuming it's not a halfling, right? If they have a halfling, then this isn't really that great, but I don't think we can mull this hand, right? We can go Crucius, pitch Fable into Will, potentially to steal their 3-drop, so just got to really hope they don't have a halfling here. Really want to see... they do. I was going to say, really want to see an Elvish Mystic or a Llanowar Elf, so that's kind of rough, but hopefully we'll get to resolve Crucius. We do get the Bowmasters in play, which does allow us to pressure their Planeswalkers if they play them. But yeah, I was really just hoping they would have an Elvish Mystic or Llanowar Elves. I mean, if they untap a land and play another Dork here, then we can potentially kill it with the Bowmasters, which would be a nice exchange. Oh, but they've got a second halfling, yikes. So that kind of sucks. I think we go after the Kiora here with the Bowmasters. And then... interesting spot. I think we just go for the Crucius, because if we do hit a Will here, that's going to be really good. But if the opponent has an untapped land, they can just go for Storm the Festival next turn, which would be a really good start for them. So trying to debate which is better. I think I'm going to pitch the Fable here because Pyromancer can help, hopefully help us dig towards a more high impact target. So now the opponent, oh wow, they're going for 6 mana. So yeah, they have Storm the Festival. So this is pretty rough. Okay, we do get a Bowmaster's trigger and they can't activate Nykthos here, which is pretty good. And we hopefully, oh wow, Haywire Might in the main deck's interesting. Maybe they think we're running the ring, potentially. I mean, we need a pretty good Winota hit here, I think. Like, obviously, Will would be ideal. So we'll attack with the 2-2. Perfect, okay. We kind of needed that. And then I think it's important to attack down the Kiora here rather than going face because they have Nykthos here, right? We do deny them 3 devotion by stealing the Polukranos, but, you know, they could very easily go another 3-drop and then untap it and get a ton of mana. So I think this makes sense. And yeah, opponents prioritizing protecting. I guess it makes sense for them to block like that regardless. But yeah, I still think it's probably correct to go after the Kiora there. And then we'll pitch the Silent Clearing in case we need more tokens off the Sock and Zan to apply more pressure. So even though the opponent had a pretty good start here, I think we're in a reasonable spot here that we could potentially stabilize. But again, you know, this matchup more often than not comes down to how good their draw is, right? I don't think there's anything you can do if the Devotion opponent just has like really good top end and can reach it consistently. But, you know, we've done a decent job at interrupting them. Cutting off 3 Devotion by stealing the Polukranos is a really big deal. Hopefully they don't have another Storm the Festival. Or it looks like they're potentially trying to cast another 3-drop here. So they go 3-drop, But then we get to kill the Cure if it's yeah. So they can go Old Growth Troll, they can produce 5 mana here, but they can't untap the Nykthos because we get to kill it with the Bowmasters, which is pretty clutch. So going after the Cure definitely paying off here. But they still have 5 mana, they could still have a Cavalier here or something like that. Okay, another Old Growth Troll. So that is kind of scary because they do have 8 Devotion going into next turn. And an Elvish Mystic as well, sure. So, I mean, thankfully we have a red card in hand, so we can potentially go for the red Specialize on Will, which is obviously very powerful with Winota in play. So I think I'm just going to lead on a Polukranos attack, get a Winota trigger to see what we hit. Okay, we do hit Juggernaut Peddler, so we get to snipe something from their hand, hopefully. Wow, 2 Khans, so that would be a very good full-up turn, potentially for them, if we didn't let them have that. I mean, obviously they have a second Khan here, which is a bit of a concern, but we should hopefully be able to, you know, cut them off some amount of devotion here. So then we can specialize the Will, go for the red specialization, and I think we want to pitch the land here. Sacrifice the Polukranos, and then we get a second combat and a second Winota trigger here because of the 3/3. Just debating how much we want to attack with here. I think we do just want to apply a lot of pressure. So I'm going to try... Well, I'm not going to throw away the Winota here, but I'm going to attack with the Will. And then, you know, hopefully... well, I mean, the second Juggernaut Peddler, taking the Khan out is pretty sick. They can, you know, they can go for the Juggernauts here, but they can't flash back the Storm the Festival, thankfully. Oh, no, wait, they can. They still have the 8 Devotion, so they can go for Storm the Festival next turn, which is kind of rough. So I think I just want to get as much into play as possible. I'm going to go for the Seasoned Pyromancer here to get another non-human in play and hopefully draw something good. Okay, another Will's pretty nice. So we've done a pretty decent job at recovering here, but they still can cast another Storm the Festival here, right? They've got 8, 9, they have exactly 10 mana. So, I mean, hopefully they don't draw anything else good here. Like, we'd love to see them fade a draw step with a land or something. Wow, another 3-drop, so that's kind of a free card for them, right? Because they can still do that and cast Storm the Festival here, so... Okay, that was kind of a whiff, though, right? I mean, Hollowhead's Wrangler is a good card, especially if they can, you know, use it to keep looping 6/6s, but... very interesting turn here, because we have a lot of choices, so... I think we just need to apply a lot of pressure here if possible. Thankfully, we've already specialized the Will, so we can use this second one to steal something. And I think because of the Old Growth Troll Death Trigger, giving them the... Well, they get to keep the Devotion. I think I'm going to use the Will to take control of the Old Growth Troll here. And then probably use this Fatal Push to kill the Yorvo. Now, actually, hold on. Yeah, I think we take the Old Growth Troll here. And then... Just debating whether we want to specialize... now or not, or whether we want to push... I think we probably want to push pre-combat. I'm just debating whether we want to go for Will Specialization now, or maybe cast the Juggernaut Peddler in case they've drawn something else good. Tough spot here, interesting spot. If we had a red card in hand, then I think it'd be a no-brainer, because then we could get, you know, same thing we did last turn, just get 2 Winota triggers. I mean, to be honest, since the Will that we've just cast doesn't have haste, I think we're probably better off just going Fatal Push now, kill the Yorvo, then attack and potentially specialize post-combat. I mean, yeah, I think we attack first here. And I'm kind of inclined to attack with everything. Because we, you know, we don't want to give them any more draw steps, really. Aha, interesting. So we hit Juggernaut Peddler, so now we can freely specialize. We can just go Juggernaut Peddler, hit that last card in their hand, and then use the specialized post-combat. Okay, so they didn't draw anything else, which is obviously good news, but they've obviously still got another draw step here, so... By the way, we're applying a lot of pressure. They only have 2 blockers here, so we get to keep a lot of our creatures around, and we're almost certainly going to be drawing 3 cards off this Will as well. So, unless they draw very, very well off the top, I think we should be good to win this one, which is kind of surprising because the opponent did get off to a good start. Normally, if they can get Storm the Festival down that quickly, it's really tough to beat, but hitting that Will off the Winota was really clutch. So they do kill our Winota and the Will, but we put them down to 3, and they've only got 3 blockers in play, so... Plus, they've only got 7 Devotion now. So, yeah, they have to give us the 3 cards. I mean, we could also reanimate something. I think we just want to go for the black specialization here, though, because drawing 3, especially when we have Crucius in hand, should set us up for a pretty good turn next turn, right? And then we sacrifice the Old Growth Troll. Unfortunately, we don't have a forest in play to get the bonus off that, but that wouldn't really matter anyway. But yeah, we get to draw 3 here, which is obviously great. And we get a Crucius trigger at the end of the turn as well. Okay. And Fatal Push is a nice draw here as well, because now we can push one of these halflings at the end of turn to deny them mana for next turn, which I think is pretty important. Definitely going to do it now, because not only does this deny them the mana off the halfling, it also denies them a devotion off the Nykthos as well. Which, you know, that could be the difference between them casting 2 Juggernauts as blockers or not. But yeah, I'd be surprised if they managed to come back. Yeah, the opponent just keeps it up, so that was a close one, but we managed to get there in the end. I think I was pretty happy with how we sideboarded there, right? Being able to kill their turn 1 elf is very important here, and like, you know, if they keep drawing halflings rather than Elvish Mystics and Llanowar Elves, you can't really rely on the Bowmasters to get the job done there either. You need, you know, the Fatal Push or Cut Down. So it's obviously going to be more tricky on the draw, but we do have a Cut Down and a Bowmasters in our opening hand, so... And the other thing is, you know, Devotion isn't the most consistent deck. Opponent did have good openings there, but I know from playing quite a lot of the deck myself that you often do have to mulligan or keep sketchy hands off the back of your mana dorks, so... Hopefully the opponent's down to 5, which does happen a fair amount of time with this deck. And I do have the Halfling, but we have the Cut Down, thankfully. And, you know, if they have like a Llanowar Elves or Elvish Mystic, we have the Bowmasters. If not, we have the Peddler to strip away their top end. Okay, they have the Wolf Willowhaven, so thankfully we can use the Peddler to take whatever they're holding on to here. But them having... Okay, we get to get rid of Polukranos. But yeah, them having, you know, access to a decent amount of mana already does then make their top decks live, right? So they do just cast the Juggernaut. We can get down a Crucius here and then pitch a land here, I think. Well, we're not going to pitch the Bowmasters with a hand this empty. Okay, perfect. We found the will. That's so good. Oh, wow. Okay, that's a pretty good draw for the opponent. I mean, they're forced to attack with the Juggernaut here, though, right? So they could potentially plus the Khan, but we can still kill it next turn by attacking Khan with both and using the Bowmasters. If they minus, then we just let the Juggernaut hit us and attack down the Khan anyway. What could they get? They could probably get... I mean, they have access to 5 mana. They could maybe get a Sky Sovereign, but they could also get Essika's Chariot or One Ring. So definitely not going to block, obviously. Snap, let that damage through. And they do minus, okay. Makes sense when they're light on resources here. So it'd be interesting to see what they grab. They do have 5 mana, so they probably can't get anything more than that, or it's really greedy, right? Okay, they go for the One Ring, so I was tempted to just use the will to steal the Juggernaut. That was kind of my plan going into this turn, but now we see the One Ring. I think we're more interested in holding this will to be able to steal the ring, because that is definitely a way they can get back into the game. As we saw from game 1, they have the inevitability in the late game, so letting them draw a bunch off the ring seems like a really bad plan. So I think I'm going to play the land tapped, and I think I'm going to pitch the Cut Down here. Obviously, pitching the land is the more intuitive thing to do, but if they draw another Khan, that shuts off our treasures, and then we wouldn't be able to hard cast the will anyway, which would be a real nightmare for me. Okay, they activate the ring so we can flash in the Bowmasters in response. And I think we target the Juggernaut one. Oh, no, wait, we can't target them anyway, so yeah, we've got to pick the Juggernaut now. And then... they do have an Elvish Mystic. I think we just block with the Orc token here, right? And then we can steal the ring here, definitely. That Elvish Mystic's annoying, though, because that shuts off our ability to apply pressure. Although I guess, you know, they've got protection from the ring, so this turn it doesn't really matter. And then, see if they block. No risk in not attacking with that. And then I was kind of tempted to run out the Giver of Runes, but I want to get value off the Crucius here. I'm going to set a stop in case I find Fatal Push. Okay, we don't find the push. But yeah, we definitely want to keep this second will here, just in case they draw something good. Okay, that's not bad, but that's another good target for the will. I mean, unfortunately, we have to... Oh, wow, they draw something else as well. Yeah, unfortunately, we have to specialize the will here. Oh, wow, okay, that's pretty rough. So that's a pretty good draw for the opponent, but... And it also shuts off our mana, you know. Had they not had a Khan there, we can specialize the will and then cast the second one without having to legend rule it. But now that they've got a second Karn, I think we might have to legend rule them before specializing, which is kind of rough. Wow, and they grab Wormcoil Engine, so pretty good sequence for the opponent there. But I mean, thankfully, I think we've still got a pretty decent turn this turn. But we do then have to consider what we're going to do about that Wormcoil Engine afterwards. So we get to steal the Pelukrinos. We can attack down the Karn here, which then unlocks both the ring and our mana. And I'm definitely going to go face, we need to apply pressure. We need to try and race this Wormcoil Engine if possible. And then we obviously have to specialize the will. I mean, a red specialize isn't bad because we get in for an additional 5 damage here, but the opponent can untap and then cast Wormcoil Engine, which is going to be pretty hard to beat, right? This deck, because it's so, will is the key card. Beating creatures with 5 or more mana value is kind of tough. So we obviously have to sacrifice the 1 ring here. And we get in, we get in for another 2 because of the Peddler here, so. And then we can pitch the land. I'm going to set a stop just in case we hit Fatal Push. Oh, perfect. Okay. So this is really clutch. Okay, so we also got very lucky there, but if the opponent doesn't find an untapped land here, they can't cast the Wormcoil Engine, which should enable us to win next turn. Okay, sweet, we got there. Nice. So that was a close one. That was a really cool game.